Hey, I'm John Cannell, and today on Preppy Kitchen, we're making a dreamy, creamy Swiss Meringue Buttercream. So let's get started. To make this frosting, you'll need room temperature butter, 5 eggs, granulated sugar, a pinch of salt, and a flavoring like vanilla, but you could use anything you want for this frosting. First off, I'm gonna get my double boiler ready. We're gonna cook our egg whites over a very low heat, coming from the steam in a water bath. So I want a medium-sized pot and maybe 2 inches of water. We're gonna get this nice and hot over like medium-high heat, but it will be reduced to a simmer before we add the eggs. I'm so excited about today's video. Swiss Meringue Buttercream is one of my all-time favorite frostings, and I'm gonna be answering a ton of questions from viewers today, so I really wanna give you like a full accounting of how to make this frosting and what to do when things go wrong. First off, we're separating the eggs, and best practices to dump this into a bowl one at a time. You're making a meringue for this, and when you make meringues, you do not want any egg yolk in there. Any fat is actually gonna inhibit your egg whites from frothing up and getting maximum fluffiness. I'm using my clean hands to separate the egg yolks, but a lot of you have tricks at home that you love, like the water bottles that you like and suck them out with, or some people like egg separators too. So these 5 egg yolks will make a delicious flan. You can make a creme pâtissière, or if you want to go crazy, you can make a French buttercream too. My water's boiling. I'm just gonna turn it down to a simmer. And now we're gonna add 300 grams or 1.5 cups of granulated sugar right into our egg whites. A lot of people ask, can I use caster sugar? Can I use superfine sugar? And the answer is yes. Those will both work fine. But here, granulated is great because it's gonna melt and you're heating it up. So a lot of times when you make meringues, you don't wanna use granulated sugar just because you're like, oh no, the granules are too big, it's gonna take too long to whip, and no one wants a gritty meringue. But because we're cooking it, no need to worry. That's perfect. All you need to do is grab a whisk. We're gonna give this a little start just to mix it up. And I wanna show you what the texture looks like right away. So initially, it's like globs of egg white filled with granulated sugar. If you felt it in your fingers like this, it would feel super sandy from all that sugar. Today I'm using a thermometer, but if you don't have one at home, I'll show you how to know when this is cooked through and done. Placing this over heat right now, and you're gonna stir this occasionally at the beginning. You don't have to whisk, 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 and hover over. Just an occasional stir is fine. It's gonna take a while to warm up. And I just wanna point out, like, take a little bit and feel it. Pure is like very just like watery with tons of sand in it. You're gonna see the texture change completely as it warms up. This is a great meringue for people who are worried about food safety, by the way. So if you're someone who does not wanna eat raw eggs like you would have in a French meringue, you can make a Swiss meringue, skip the butter, just stop at the meringue part, and it is perfect for tarts and pies and everything else. It's been completely cooked through, and it's just a wonderful marshmallowy, thick, silky consistency. I love it. And just to be crystal clear, the water should never touch the bowl. It's steam heat, so it's gently heating all of those egg whites. Otherwise, they'll get cooked and scrambled, and that's not gonna be silky and delicious. There are a couple points in this recipe where you're gonna think, oh my gosh, this is not right, this went wrong. And if you don't keep going and have faith in the recipe, it's not gonna turn itself around. So I'll tell you when that happens, but as long as you complete this through and just move forward with confidence, everything's gonna be okay, and you're gonna be so happy. This has been cooking for just a few minutes. You can see the consistency is changing. It's becoming a little bit more like gooey, if you will. And if I use my Thermapen, it's at like 110 right now. I want this to get to 160. That's when I know it's cooked through and safe. And if you feel it with your fingers, if you don't have a thermometer, it should feel like basically hot, not burning hot or scalding, but it should feel like on the very hotter end of warm. And you'll feel no sugar granules. It'll be completely smooth. But I can still feel some sugar. I know it's not ready, and it's also not hot. It's just lukewarm. As this warms up, you're gonna stir more frequently, and one thing to watch out for is the edge right here where the bowl comes into contact with your hot pot. That's a warm spot, so you wanna make sure that your whisk is kind of scraping it and just keeping things moving there, because It's not gonna cook the egg completely, but it'll change the consistency to be a bit thick and you could get little granules. If you're using a thermometer to test your temperature, the thermometer should be in the eggs, but not touching the bowl. The bowl is a different temperature than what's inside of it. This is a great job for those people who are like, oh, I'd love to help you, but I don't know how to cook. Stir, stir, stir. My eggs hit 160. One thing I wanna tell you before they go in the mixing bowl, if anyone helped you in the kitchen to do the dishes and you're not 100% sure, you could just wipe the inside of your bowl with some vinegar really quickly. And what's gonna happen is it will just take away any residual fat. Like if you made chocolate frosting in here and someone kindly offered to do the dishes, now you know it's perfectly clean, no fat, and this will mix up really well. Add that amazing eggy mixture in, and let me show you what the consistency looks like, by the way. It's really frothy, marshmallowy. It feels hot in your fingers, and it is super smooth. No more sugars left in there. Pop a whisk on. A lot of people ask, can I do this at home with a hand mixer? And the answer is, yes, you can, but you have to be super patient because it takes a while. The nice thing about a stand mixer is you can set it, walk away, come back and check on it. If you're using a hand mixer, you have to stay there the whole time, but I will give you a couple tricks to expedite the process. We're gonna move this up to high, and this will mix up until it is an amazing marshmallowy meringue. I cannot wait to show you. You can probably see all the steam right here. It is hot. We cannot add room temperature butter into this. It'll all melt and become crazy. So this mixer is running until we get one, a beautiful meringue, but two, a room temperature meringue. It's gonna come down from 160 all the way to like 75 degrees or so. But just to show you, this has only been mixing for a few minutes, and you can see already, like that's 60 seconds in basically, it looks like marshmallow fluff. Just wait till you see what happens. While it mixes, I'm adding in a generous pinch of salt. There we go. If you want to use salted butter, you definitely can. You'll taste the salt. Don't add any extra salt. A couple minutes in. This texture is actually nice right now and really marshmallowy, but my bowl is hot. So here's the deal. You can let this run until it gets to room temperature on its own, or you can pop into the freezer and see what's here that's cold that I can press against the side. Frozen peas work really well. And if you're using a hand mixer in a big bowl, then you can either pack it with frozen peas and stuff like that, or put it into another bowl with ice so it cools down more quickly. That way you're not hovering over with the hand mixer saying, oh my gosh, I wanna go places, but I'm stuck here. I'm letting this run, I'm gonna find those peas. Yay, cool down faster. You know, a lot of people ask, is Swiss meringue buttercream the same or different? Like what's the deal with Swiss meringue and Italian meringue buttercream? And they're very similar. Most people wouldn't be able to tell the difference in the texture and the taste. They're creamy, they're light. The flavor will complement your cake or dessert that you're using it with. It's not gonna overpower it like an American buttercream can. It's not ultra sweet, but the main difference is in the ease of making it. If you're using this with like younger kids and they're helping in the kitchen or something, much safer, less risk of burning for making a Swiss meringue buttercream. Italian has a sugar syrup that's 360 degrees, so you have to be very careful with it. But they're both so similar, really creamy, amazing flavor. I hope you make both of them, and you can tell me which one is your favorite in the comments. Look at that stiff peak, so amazing. I just wanna temp it. It's like just under 90 degrees, so it can go for a little bit more. So while this is mixing and you're getting closer, test your butter. It should be room temperature, and what that means is you can use your finger and press into it, and you're pressing in, not crazy pressure you're adding, but it's yielding to the touch. However, it's not falling apart and really gooey. So if I press into it, I see my finger, the whole butter doesn't do this. That's too soft. While this is mixing, once it's getting closer, just open your butter, packages up. We're gonna use 1 full pound, 2 cups, that is 452 grams of butter. And we're gonna cut this into tablespoon-sized pieces, so you can cut it while it's mixing and just do some prep work. If you wanna know, can I use less butter? You may not. I'm sorry. This is the exact amount of butter that you need to stabilize this. If you add less, it's gonna be too liquidy. If you add more, you can honestly add a couple tablespoons more butter, but you shouldn't need to. And if you add too much, it sets up really firm once it's cold. So it's like almost too firm and things can get weird. So normally your mixer is running between 10 and 15 minutes. So it seems longer when you're hovering. You can go do something else and come back to it. Really, you're just waiting for it to cool down so it's room temperature-ish. It could be a bit warmer, like upper 70s, maybe even lower 80s, but just be careful because that butter will turn into a soup. And we'll talk about that in a second. Okay, this feels like warmer room temperature, that's fine. And now I wanna tell you about a best practice, switching to a paddle. For most buttercreams you make, like an American buttercream or many other things, you wanna use a paddle on low speed because you don't wanna beat a ton of air into it. It sounds weird here because this is like nothing but air. It's like air full of billions of air bubbles. You can totally use a whisk attachment for this entire thing, but I just feel like a paddle will give you best results for beating that butter in and having a creamy texture that doesn't have a ton of big bubbles in it. Paddle attachment on. Now, while mixing on lowish speed, we're gonna add our butter a tablespoon at a time. And this is the point where I've had friends and also readers on the blog tell me that they started adding the butter in and it turned into soup. So people panic and they're like, oh my gosh, wait, I'm gonna stop adding butter and keep mixing so it fixes itself before I add more butter in. It will never fix itself. It's not gonna happen. You have to add all the butter in, every last drop, and then, like magic, it's gonna come together and be amazing. And if it doesn't, we can fix that, and I'll tell you how. Add this in a tablespoon at a time, like making a meringue where you casually add the sugar in a little drizzle, just dropping little coins of butter in. It's also something really fun for kids to do. So if they wanna help, just adding the butter in after you cut it to make a frosting. So right now I've added in like half a cup of butter, and this is what's happening. It's really becoming soupier and gloopier. Remember those beautiful stiff peaks? Those are gone. And this is with like making it the perfect way. So the butter, colder room temperature. This, room temperature-ish, warmish. If your butter was too warm and like really soft, it's a pool. It's a pool of liquid, but it's okay. Just keep adding it in and we'll see what happens. This is like the very best case scenario. If it's looking really liquidy though, that's fine too. Just keep adding it, keep going. A lot of people will ask, how does this taste? Like I've never had it before. And the answer is, it tastes however you flavor it. If you flavor it with vanilla, you will really taste the vanilla. If you flavor it with chocolate or caramel or orange blossom water, those flavors will come through really strongly, but it's not gonna be overtly sweet. It won't be like, oh my gosh, what's going on? It's just gonna really complement the cake. And honestly, I love it because you can eat more. You never feel sick. You're just like, oh, that was like so light and refreshing and delicious. Most of the butter is in and it's only gotten worse. It looks like a lake in the middle here, but I will point out that this is not totally mixed. You have pure meringue on the bottom and that's not okay. You wanna have a homogeneous mixture. So just scrape the bowl down really once is all you need to do it. And then we're going to keep adding the butter. And this amount of frosting is enough to decorate a 2 or even 3 layer 8-inch cake. You could decorate a 3-layer 6-inch cake and have a ton of frosting left over for really great designs. Or you could decorate, I would say, about 24 cupcakes with it. And the nice thing about Swiss Meringue Buttercream is it stores really well. So you can add this onto your dessert, and if you have any extra left over, it'll store for a week in the fridge in an airtight container, or a month in the freezer, also in an airtight container. One caveat though is, if you just try to use it out of the container after it thaws, you thaw it on the counter, it's gonna look horrible. So it will not have this consistency, but the fix is really easy. We'll show you how that happens. Last 1, 2 tablespoons are in. Let this mix for a minute and then we're gonna see how this looks because one, no lumps can be here. I see little lumps of butter. You gotta keep mixing it up. And you can increase this to a medium. Oh my gosh, wait, I'm gonna stop this so you can come look. So you saw the texture was like kind of very liquidy, and I just added the last piece of butter, And all of a sudden, do you see this? It's cloudy now. It's like a cloud of delicious frosting. You wanna see the consistency look like this. It looks like beautiful Baroque clouds in the air. It's not gloopy. If it's gloopy after you add the butter, it's okay. Things were a little bit warm. Sometimes it's a hot day, just happens. Pop the bowl into the fridge for about 5 minutes, give it a mix. If it's still gloopy, another 5 minutes, give it a mix, check it again. It will fix itself every single time. So sometimes it's just too hot that day. I'm just gonna mix this for 1 more minute because I see some tiny clumps of butter. I want it to be silky smooth. And now that 1 extra minute made even more of a difference because beautiful, buttery, silky, and look at that mirror smooth finish. Come and take a look at this finish. This is why everyone loves Swiss Meringue Buttercream. Besides the taste, it decorates so beautifully. Do you see that? If your frosting sitting out for a while like this, or if you stored it in the refrigerator or freezer and brought it back to room temperature, you'll see it has a crazy foamy texture, not silky smooth. It's not ruined. All you need to do is give it a whisk for 30 seconds. Look at this frosting and take a look at that foamy consistency. You see how it's full of air bubbles? That's what it looks like. It's full of these foamy air bubbles and it just won't smooth out. You can use a whisk or pop it onto your machine and just give it a really quick 30-second whisk. And you'll see, look at that beautiful meringue. It came right back to life and it's a silky smooth. There are a couple more huge things I need to discuss. One, the flavor. If you want a vanilla buttercream, just add in, a couple teaspoons of vanilla. It's totally up to you. Mix it in, it'll be amazing and delicious and really highlight that vanilla. You can also mix in melted chocolate. You could mix in caramel. You could have made this with brown butter instead. You could brown the butter like we talk about in this channel all the time, and that adds a wonderful depth of flavor. But any single flavoring will work in this, even like the juice from maraschino cherries. But there's another thing. You saw that consistency? It was amazing. It doesn't last. You have to use this frosting either right away or like, let's say I want to go have lunch in a minute. So I'm gonna come back, I made my frosting, or the cake's still warm, I have to wait. That's fine. I'm gonna let some frosting sit and show you what it looks like. You're gonna see it looks like sea foam. It gets all these crazy big air bubbles. You're like, oh, I don't like this, what happened? That just happens if it sits for like 5 minutes or more. So if you're making the frosting, give it a quick whip, just 30 seconds, and it'll be silky smooth again. That's all it needs is like 30 seconds of whipping up and it'll be amazing. The last point I need to show you is how to color this. This frosting does not color like regular frosting. It will never have a saturated hue unless you do one kind of like tricky step, which I'll show you right now. Normally with the frosting, you just add the color in and it's like, oh, perfect. Or you add a little bit more, gets a deeper color. Here, with a meringue-based frosting like Swiss or Italian, I'm gonna add in some fuchsia gel food coloring, which is very strong and very pink. So I'm gonna mix this up. And you're like, oh, that's not what I expected. It's like such a pastel. I actually love this color the way it is right now, but it's not the color of the food coloring and it's never gonna get deeper. This was enough food coloring to color the entire batch of frosting. What happens is there's little micro beads of color suspended throughout this after you mix it, and you always get these pastel colors, which I actually love, but we're not always making pastel cakes. So if you want to get a true color and not add a ton of food coloring in, you take a little batch of this, like a couple tablespoons, add food coloring in, more than you think you might need, and you microwave this for 30 seconds to melt it. I'm gonna pop this into the microwave and show you what happens. So here, this is it after microwaving. This is the color it was. So you can see the difference. Mix it up, it gets even darker now. This is the base you use to color the frosting. So now if I wanna have the entire batch be magenta or fuchsia, I would just pour that in and mix it up. So if you add the frosting in, now it will have the color. Moral of the story is melt little batches of the buttercream with food coloring and mix that in to make your amazing colors. Then it'll be just right and so beautiful too. So if you're coloring batches of frosting, grab some more frosting now and plop that into your melted colored frosting and mix it up. This frosting is the perfect vehicle for delicious flavors. So for example, if you wanted a chocolate buttercream that's gonna be to die for, Just melt as much chocolate as you want. It's really up to you. And add this in. Did you want chocolate peanut butter? Just melt chocolate and peanut butter together, and you can mix that in, and it's gonna be the most amazing frosting ever. It really lets the chocolate shine through without adding a cloying sweetness that takes away from the dessert. Look at this, so beautiful instantly. And the nice part about adding chocolate in is it sets up even firmer, so your cake will like not topple over or melt. It'll be nice and strong. I've got to show you how this pipes. Fill up your piping bag, and have you ever seen a more perfect dollop? Look at that. That brings joy to my face. This is gonna be your new best friend in the kitchen. This frosting is so delicious, you'll be eating it by the spoonful. That is incredibly delicious. You've gotta make this recipe. If you like this video, check out my frosting playlist.